We are a couple of weeks into the NFL season, and some teams like the Chargers and Eagles are off to very hot starts, while others are off to very poor starts, to say the least. A Super Bowl champion is not crowned after a couple of weeks, of course, but with there only being 17 regular season games, every game in the NFL means that much more. And that's why starting the year on the right foot is such a big deal. And for the teams we discuss in today's video, well, they haven't started off on the right foot. And while the expectations for each team in today's video may not all have been Super Bowl or bust, each team in today's video certainly expected to perform a lot better than they have so far. And in today's video, we're going to discuss what went right, what's went wrong, and how or even if they can fix the problems they've had so far. Full transparency, I don't think a few of these problems are going to be fixable for the 2025 season because they are very, very concerning. But there is a lot to break down in today's video, and without further ado, let's begin. And we are starting today's video with the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders are 1-2 through 3 games, and after a Week 1 win in New England, the past couple of weeks have been frustrating to say the least. And even within the Week 1 win over the Patriots, a win is a win, and it was good to see that for this team, especially with how their quarterbacks played in 2024, but the run game was something to note. And for clarity, I don't think something should be a concern after one game. I mean, unless you get beat by 45 points and have 5 or 6 turnovers, and have one of the worst games in the past 10 years, which the Raiders obviously did not. But given they spent the 6th overall pick on Ashton Jeanty in the 2025 draft, as well as having Pete Carroll as the team's head coach, well, you knew they were going to place an emphasis on running the football. And through 3 games, Ashton Jeanty has 144 rushing yards on 47 carries for an average of just 3.1 yards per carry. Now, the conversation is not about if Ashton Jeanty is a bust 12 quarters into his career. No, I think there's been a few flashes for him to get excited about, emphasis on a few, but the conversation is about the offensive line. This offensive line is horrific at times, and I don't think it's a coincidence that Zamir White, who is Ashton Jeanty's backup, has just 25 rushing yards on 10 carries in 3 games. But there's 2 plays from the Washington game I want to highlight to give context as to what I'm talking about and why this is such a concern moving forward. The first was a 1st and 10 run against Washington that resulted in a gain of 0 yards. Guard Alex Kappa and center Jordan Meredith initially double-team Eddie Goldman. Alex Kappa's job on this play is to get enough of Eddie Goldman so that Jordan Meredith can wall him off before Ashton Jeanty runs behind him in the gap between him and the right tackle. But Eddie Goldman keeps driving Meredith back, and Javonte Jean-Baptiste does a phenomenal job of setting a hard edge against DJ Glaze at right tackle, and mixed within this, somehow, someway, Alex Kappa, whose second responsibility was to then take the linebacker out of the play, winds up on his rear end, and Ashton Jeanty is tackled for no gain. Between the complete lack of push from the center and right tackle, as well as the right guard ending up on his bottom, this is what nothing short of frustration for the Raiders' run game looks like, and a reason why Ashton Jeanty is averaging 3.1 yards per carry through 3 games. There's another play later in the game where the Raiders are running an inside zone split, and center Jordan Meredith's job is to get just enough of Daron Payne to ensure he doesn't blow up the play working back against the grain, and as he steps up, to block Frankie Louvu. Well, Frankie Louvu wasn't having any of it, and the play was designed for Jeanty to cut it back, and I do want to credit Ian Thomas, Brock Bowers, and Colton Miller for making this play work, but these 2 plays give more context as to who is paving the way for Ashton Jeanty during his rookie season. And my biggest concern for the Raiders is, well, good offensive linemen generally don't leave, and you're not going to trade multiple first-round picks for Penei Sewell or somebody of that caliber midway through the year, and the Lions obviously wouldn't trade Penei Sewell either, just being realistic. And if we're having these types of troubles this early in the year with the offensive line, then what is it going to be in December? And this is not including pass protection either, in which the Raiders already have 3 players who have allowed 10 or more pressures in the first 3 weeks of the season, and for reference, there's only 17 players in the entire NFL who have allowed 10 or more pressures so far, and the Raiders have 3 on their roster. Needless to say, there's a lot of problems in Sin City. And when we talk about NFL team building and we talk about addressing the future, we discussed how teams draft a position of need a year ahead, and it's never a bad idea to plan for your future too, and that's where today's sponsor comes into play, Ethos. And with life insurance from Ethos, your family is protected. Now, I myself do not have kids, but I have friends, of course, who do, and relatives too, for that matter, and we've discussed the financial responsibility that comes with providing for their said kids and everything that comes along with that, and how Ethos can help protect your family and their future too. Now, the traditional life insurance process can be complicated, but Ethos is an online platform that makes getting life insurance both fast and easy, and it can take a matter of minutes, not months. There is no medical exam required, you just have to answer a few health questions online. Ethos also has 4.8 out of 5 stars on Trustpilot with over 2,400 reviews, and you can get a policy for as low as $2 a day, which is billed monthly. And you can get a quote in as little as 10 minutes, and ultimately you can protect your family's future with life insurance from Ethos. Get your free quote at ethos.com/GFB. That's ethos.com/GFB, and a big thank you to Ethos for sponsoring today's video. Next up is the Dallas Cowboys, and I know the low-hanging fruit is to strictly discuss the Micah Parsons trade, but there's a lot more problems with this roster than just Micah Parsons, and that was one of my biggest concerns for Dallas heading into 2025, or things to note, was who is going to step up outside of Micah Parsons. Now, I do like Donovan Ezaraku, a second-round rookie that the Cowboys just drafted out of Boston College, and think he will be a good player with time, and I really liked the idea of him and Micah Parsons as a pass-rushing duo, but now that Micah Parsons is gone, there is a big problem in Dallas, and it of course is the defense. They have allowed 24 points, 37 points, and 31 points in the first 3 games of the year, and they also allowed 450 passing yards to Russell Wilson in week 2, who of course was just benched for Jackson Dart. Now, one thing that I do want to clarify with the Cowboys and their roster managing over the past couple of years is I do think that Jerry Jones is at times a little overhated. Now, for clarity, the Micah Parsons trade deserves all of the ridicule and slander and criticism that you can get, because you should not trade a player of that caliber in his prime whenever it comes to money, especially when Micah was pretty open over a year ago that he said, hey, I'll take less to stay in Dallas long term, I just want to get the deal worked out. That deserves a lot of criticism. But with the way that Dallas has built their roster over the past couple of years, by drafting players like Sam Williams, Marshawn Kneeland, and now Donovan Ezaraku, all in the second round, well, I mean, Jerry Jones has done his best to try and build this roster the right way, which is through the trenches. And then you also look at Tyler Smith in the first round back in 2022. You look at Mozzie Smith in the first round in 2023, Tyler Booker this past year, even Cooper Beebe a couple of years ago, and you get the point. I will stand by the fact that from a process standpoint, I think Dallas does a lot of things right, but whenever you do not have Micah Parsons to be able to take the double teams and to be able to be the main focus of the opposing offense, well, now you are relying on Sam Williams, Marshawn Kneeland, and Donovan Ezaraku as a rookie to replace Micah Parsons' production, and as we've seen through the first 3 weeks, you cannot replace a player of Micah Parsons' caliber overnight, and that's one of the biggest reasons as to why Dallas is in today's video. Now, one other big problem I have with the Cowboys is right now they're 31st in EPA per play defensively. The Dolphins are the only team that's worse, and they are in a complete nightmare of a situation of their own, as they had a players-only meeting after week 1, and generally a players meeting after week 1 signifies that, hey, people are going to get fired and soon, but pertaining to the Cowboys specifically, I don't know what the vision of this team is long-term, and sure, you can say, hey, we got a couple of first-round picks for Micah Parsons in addition to defensive tackle Kenny Clark, but Troy Aikman said within the Cowboys documentary that recently released that, hey, I felt like my career was being wasted towards the end and it was being done on my time, and they say history repeats itself, and I can't help but feel the exact same way with Dak Prescott, who is now in his 30s, and whenever you look at this team, they are not a player or two away from a Super Bowl. They are several players away. Now, it is unfortunate that CeeDee Lamb is out for a couple of weeks, and the Cowboys would have been in the video with or without CeeDee Lamb getting injured, because whether CeeDee Lamb is healthy or not, I kind of ask the question, do you think the Cowboys are going to go to the Super Bowl this year? And internally, I think Jerry Jones thinks that they are, that Micah Parsons being traded was not that big of a deal because they were able to replace him with Kenny Clark, in addition to having all of those high draft assets that they've invested in the trenches over the past couple of years. But now that we are 1-2, 3 games in, and the Philadelphia Eagles are 3-0, and given that the Cowboys already lost to the Eagles, I don't like to get into the conversation of saying, hey, teams' seasons are over just a couple of games in, but the Cowboys are not trying to go 6-11, they're not trying to go 7-10, and Jerry Jones is not content with either of those types of seasons, and I really do think that he thinks that the Cowboys can win the Super Bowl. So whenever you look at the fact that the Cowboys are 1-2 and are probably not going to win the NFC East because the Commanders are also a really solid team, and again, the Eagles are 3-0, which are already 2 games ahead of the Cowboys, you have to sit back and kind of do the math math and say, okay, hey, if Dallas gets into the postseason, are they realistically going to go on the road and beat a team like the Rams, beat a team like the Lions or Packers, and then of course beat a team like the Eagles when it matters? So to me, the answer is, and I would also imagine everyone feels this way, no. Now, I do want to credit the Cowboys offense for playing the way they have in the first couple of weeks of the year, and I know they only put up 14 points in Chicago, and Dak did throw 2 interceptions in that game. Obviously, the 1 interception was not on him, and if you want to say the second interception on the goal line was on Dak, by all means, go for it, but I would rather my quarterback try and make a play in a situation like that than try and hold the ball or throw an intentional grounding, or like we've seen at times, throw the ball away on 4th and goal. So if you want to say that's on him, go for it and take your victory lap as a Dak hater, by all means. But whenever you look at this team, even when they're healthy, even if they have a healthy CeeDee Lamb for all 17 games, I go back to the question, what is the vision with this team? And now that we've seen the Cowboys pass rush and ultimately their defense for just 3 measly games without Micah Parsons, I think there is a part of Jerry Jones that would probably say, hey, let's hash this out and pay Micah Parsons, because this team looks a heck of a lot different without Micah Parsons. And now that we have the extra first round picks without him, I kind of go back to the question with an aging quarterback who is now above the 30 mark, and with CeeDee Lamb, who is 26 years old and will soon approach the 30 mark, with a defense that, again, is not exactly a player or 2 away, I do go back to the almighty question of what is the long-term vision with this team? The Denver Broncos are up, and out of the teams in today's video, I think the mistakes they've made through the first few weeks are the most correctable. The Broncos are 1-2 after losses to the Colts in week 2 and to the Chargers in week 3, but there is certainly reason to be frustrated with this team at this specific point in time. The leverage penalty at the end of the Colts game was maddening if you were a Broncos fan for obvious reasons, but at the same time, Denver also allowed nearly 500 yards of offense and lost the turnover battle in the same game. Now, the week 3 game against the Chargers was also frustrating, though this was for different reasons. Denver had a 3rd and 13 with 6 minutes left in the game, and Bo Nix ran for 12 yards. Now, I'll be honest, when I watched this play live, I thought Bo Nix had the first down, but he didn't, and it was 4th and inches. And with the clock ticking on the road against a very good team in the Los Angeles Chargers, I thought the Broncos should have went for it. And I think there's been some questionable decisions from Sean Payton a couple of games into the year, and this was one of them. I also think it's fair to say that Bo Nix has not been a great player 3 games into the 2025 season, but stopping him on 4th and inches would have been difficult for anyone, even a Jesse Minter coach defense. You can run a play from empty, you can run a jet sweep, you can give the ball to J.K. Dobbins, you can do almost anything. And they chose to punt the football, and the result that Denver did not want to have happen, which was the Chargers scoring a touchdown to tie the game, happened anyway. If there is one thing to criticize or note about Bo Nix a couple of games into the year, it's definitely his deep ball accuracy. Every game you hear about how a play or 2 would have made a difference in the game, and obviously you can apply this to the Charger side of things too, but there was a flea flicker on 3rd and 19 in the second quarter in which Bo Nix threw a ball that was just overthrown to Marvin Mims. I know there will certainly be a crowd that would say he has to catch that football, but if this ball is thrown 6 inches shorter, the Broncos score a touchdown on this play. And of course, there was the incompletion to Courtland Sutton on 3rd and 10 with 2 minutes to play, which forced 4th down from Denver's 22-yard line and gave the Chargers the ball back, and they went down the field and kicked a field goal to win 23-20. Now, going back to week 1 against Tennessee, I think Broncos fans can acknowledge the decision to go for it on 4th and 8 from Tennessee's 36-yard line with 1 minute left to play was kind of a bad decision, though I didn't have a problem with it because you were playing the Titans of all teams, and I certainly trust Denver's defense to make a stop against the Titans, especially in a rookie quarterback's NFL debut. And by the way, what I mean by bad decision is more of a bad thought process than anything. But I do think there's times where Bo Nix plays a little rushed, and on this specific play, the 4th and 8 was one of them. They were running a Yankee concept, which is a very common concept in the NFL, and pay attention, you'll probably see it this Sunday, and Courtland Sutton was as open as you can possibly be on this route. He had a safety on him, and it didn't go well for the safety, and Bo never looked his way. It was get to the top of the drop and throw it to Marvin Mims. Now, the Broncos went on to win this game, and that's what matters most, of course, but with Denver, this is a team that I think is underachieving through the first few games, and like we said at the beginning of this portion of the video, I do think a lot of these problems are correctable, and the reality is, yes, Denver is 1-2, but they didn't get blown out in either loss, and there is a strong case to be made that they should be 3-0. but I also think it's worth noting the coaching decisions could be better, and that Bo Nix can certainly play better too. Bo started out slow last year, and I do expect him to pick it up, but I did want to point these things out with the Denver Broncos. Next up is the Baltimore Ravens, who are coming off of a 38-24 loss to the Detroit Lions on Monday night at Week 3 at home at M&T Bank Stadium. This was the Ravens' second loss in 3 games, as they, of course, lost in Week 1 to the Buffalo Bills with a score of 41-40. Now, there's a couple of conversations to be had with the Baltimore Ravens. There is a conversation about the offense and how at times they have looked downright unstoppable, specifically within the first 3 quarters of the Buffalo game, but since then, and more specifically within the Lions game, the Ravens offense looked beatable, and I do want to credit Lions defensive coordinator Kelvin Shepard for doing a really good job of planning against Lamar and game planning of how to stop Lamar in the passing game, and he did a really good job of showing 5 initially and then kind of dropping a linebacker out while keeping him as a linebacker spy, but also keeping him at the line of scrimmage so that whenever Lamar would kind of drop back 10 or 12 yards and then re-step up into the pocket, the linebacker was right there and there was nowhere for Lamar to go. Now, we'll see over the course of this season if other teams game plan that way against the Ravens and how or if they plan to stop Lamar moving forward, but what I will say is Lamar is a 2-time league MVP, definitely a conversation to be had within the Ravens fan base of whether or not he should have been a 3-time league MVP. No comment on that specific debate. Now, for the defensive side of the football for the Ravens, this is where I think there's a much bigger conversation to be had, because the Detroit Lions went into M&T Bank Stadium and very much took their lunch money. They ran for over 220 yards as a team, and whenever you run for over 200 yards as a team and have a player have a game like David Montgomery had, who had 150 rushing yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, that is not just a game on the schedule for them. That is one of the best games of their careers. And for the Lions to be in the 3rd game under offensive coordinator John Morton, well, I will say that I think there were a lot of overreactions after the Week 1 game and how the Lions were going to be cooked all year and all of that, but to go into M&T Bank Stadium, even with Nnamdi Madubuike out, Kyle Van Noy out, and Jair Alexander out, who did not look great in Week 1 against Buffalo, but the fact that the Ravens had 3 defensive players out and to still put up 38 points in the process does not bode well for the future of the 2025 Ravens defense. Now, one thing I do want to speak on specifically with the 2025 Ravens defense is I don't think it's going to be an automatic case like last year where, hey, you know what, we're going to stink in the first 8 or 9 games of the 2025 season, the same exact way we did last year, and then we're going to flip a switch, make an adjustment, correct a starter on defense, or swap out a starter like they did last year, and everything is going to be okay. I do think that there is a big level of concern with the Ravens defense at this point to have the 32nd best or the worst defense in rushing EPA per play through the first few weeks, given the fact that you've played the Bills and Lions in 2 of your first 3 games. Because the reality is, if the Ravens are going to the Super Bowl this year, which internally they do believe, then you are probably going to have to go through Buffalo at some point. The absolute best case scenario is that the Chiefs would play the Bills in the divisional round and that you would beat whoever in the divisional round and then play the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game because they presumably took care of Buffalo in the divisional round. But the point is, you have to be able to stop the run consistently, and the Ravens have not been able to prove that they can do that against the best teams in the Bills and Lions, or 2 of the better teams in the NFL. Now, one other thing with the Ravens at this point in time, Derrick Henry has fumbled in each of the first 3 games. Derrick Henry is a future Hall of Famer. He will be getting a gold jacket 5 years after he retires. If there's any take that I think we can agree on in today's video, I think that we should all agree on that Derrick Henry is a future first ballot Hall of Famer, but given that he's had, fumble issues through the first 3 games, I do think that he will be fine, and that I don't think he's going to continue to keep fumbling, and that I don't want to really address that aside from discussing the fact that he has fumbled, and I know people would want that to be brought up, but I think that that will get corrected over time, and that Derrick Henry will again have a good year for the Ravens this year. It's just that he's had a tough start to the season, but everybody goes through their own personal adversity at some point throughout a 17-game season because, like we've said a million times on the channel before, the NFL season is a marathon and not a sprint, and I do believe that Derrick Henry Henry will figure everything out. And ultimately, I believe the Ravens will figure everything out as well. It's just that I don't think it's going to be sunshine and rainbows at times like it was last year. Now, the Ravens did go through their fair share of adversity as well, like we mentioned in the first 10 games, and Jamar Chase having over 250 yards and 3 touchdowns at M&T Bank Stadium. But again, the Ravens did figure it out, and I do think that they will still be a playoff team. I don't want that part to be lost, as I think they will comfortably win the AFC North this year, and their schedule isn't all that bad. Yes, they have difficult games, like everyone has difficult games, but there's going to be a part coming up where they can easily rattle off 4 or 5 wins in a row, and quite frankly, I'd be surprised if this team finishes worse than 11-6 this year, despite starting out with a 1-2, possibly even 1-3 record, because they play at Arrowhead in Kansas City in Week 4. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as it helps the channel tremendously, and I cannot thank you guys enough for the support. We're trying to 215,000 subscribers by the end of the month of September, and we're almost there, so appreciate everybody watching. Hopefully you enjoyed. Thank you to Ethos for sponsoring today's video, and until next time, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.